So I never grew up around people going to work every day. So I saw my parents being able to do what they wanted, and that it seemed like they had a lot more freedom compared to what I had heard about other families. So I wanted that same freedom. So I thought, if what they're saying is true, how can I have the same freedom they do? And that's when I learned that they have their freedom from the passive income of real estate.
Hello and welcome to the Eternal Optimist podcast. I'm your host, Matt Drinkon, and I'm here to help you on your learning path. If you're curious, and you're always looking for ways to level up your game and to learn in every circumstance, you're in the right place, my friends. Here at the Eternal Optimist podcast, we are constantly challenging ourselves to see things through a positive lens and to learn whenever we possibly can. And today, we are going to give you a masterclass in how to learn. And what I mean by that, it's really simple, and I'll get to that in a second. Before I introduce our guest, I would like to encourage everyone here. Go to the Apple Podcast or the Spotify Podcast app and please like, rate, and review and share this podcast with someone that you feel might enjoy it. I appreciate that tremendously, my friends. I want to get that word out there about hope and you can do it too attitude. And this is the place, and your appreciation, your sharing is the place that's really going to help us. So please do that today, team. Also, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook at Eternal Optimist Podcast account, and check out the live stream every morning, Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time on those channels. So, having shared that, today's episode is all about, learning. It's all about learning. And I say that with a grain of salt because today I have a 13-year-old on the show. Whoa, hold on a second, Matt. Why do you have a 13-year-old on the show? What can we possibly learn? Well, I'll tell you a couple things about this 13-year-old. This 13-year-old has more real estate already purchased and owned in his portfolio than most people that are probably listening to this show right now. That's what we can learn for one. His name is Mr. Ethan Wohlwend. Ethan Wohlwend. And I have had his father and his now 16-year-old brother Devin. I've had him on the show as well, and I actually have their mom on the show as well. This whole family is amazing, and today the youngest member of the family, Ethan, drops by to share some nuggets of wisdom that he's picked up. So imagine this. Here's a question that Ethan uses as a filter for most of the things he does. If what people are saying is true, then how am I to get my freedom too? Interesting. He uses that as a filter when talking business and hearing ideas out there. He talks about a friendly, loving competition with his brother that drives him. He talks about how every day he reads for 30 minutes. He talks about the art of knowing, liking, and being trustworthy when speaking with people that are prospective tenants, people that are prospective business owners that might acquire their business. Yes, this is someone who's 13 speaking this way already. Amazing. Amazing. He talks about a mistake that he made in his first property, when he had a rehab to do and it had issues and he didn't keep his eye on the ball. So he's very open in sharing his first challenge there. He talks about his philosophy of continuing to buy more real estate and serve people that way. And guess what? He has a group, a young entrepreneurs group, his own mastermind. And he's going to go through that today and talk about how you, if you're between the ages of 7 and 25, can be involved in his mastermind, the Young Millionaires in Training. And we'll talk more about that. My friends, this is an amazing conversation. The depth of knowledge and the way this young man learns is amazing. And if no matter where you are in your life, if you're looking to start somewhere, this is a great place to start. Listen to the way that he speaks. It's awesome. Without any further ado, my new friend, Mr. Ethan Wohlwend. Enjoy. And now a break for our sponsor. Today's sponsor is a shout out. It's actually a shout out to today's guest, Mr. Ethan Wohlwend, for his book, The Treehouse. And when I met Ethan face to face in January of 2023 here in Charlotte, North Carolina, he was kind enough to sign a copy of his book and gift it to me so I might give it to my daughters. And my 7-year-old daughter right now has read his book, The Treehouse, and she absolutely loved it. Yes, my 7-year-old, my second grader, read this book and loved it. And it's a story about how to build your first business. And Ethan right now is 13. He actually did something just like this years ago. So if anyone out there is interested in how to get started in business, don't take for granted how simple it actually might be. And Ethan lays out a wonderful story in The Treehouse. I would encourage adults to read it. I would encourage adults with young children to read it too and share with their kids. This is an amazing book by an awesome young man. So I encourage you to check out The Treehouse by none other than Mr. Ethan Wohlwend. Now, back to the interview with Ethan.
Hello, and welcome to the Eternal Optimist podcast, the show for optimists by optimists. This is the show for people who see the good in the world and want to make a positive difference in the lives of their families and communities. Each week, you'll hear inspiring stories that will get you thinking bigger and playing more offense in life. With your host and high-performance coach, Matt Drinkon.
Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, it is my sincere privilege and pleasure and honor to bring to you today my new friend, Mr. Ethan Wohlwend. Ethan, how are you today, my friend?
Very good. Thanks for having me on.
Real pleasure. And what's really awesome for me sitting in this seat and for our listeners is that we've had the privilege of meeting. Your father was back on the show, recorded back in November. Then I had a chance to meet your older brother. And when I say older, he is about to turn 16. And he's already successful in business and real estate and investing. And he shared his story. I had the chance to meet your mother was on the show, and she also great stories, successful in a number of ways. I mean, the whole family has just been really a joy to meet. And now I get to meet you, who the youngest of the clan, but also successful in your own right. So I'm just super excited to join today and to talk about all the things that you have done and you are doing. Before we get to any of that, I'd love to kind of hone in for a second here on, can you give us a little bit about your background, just your childhood, how you've grown up, just a minute or a few on your origin story, if you will.
So I don't want to say a normal childhood, but I grew up, I did schoolwork, I had fun with my family, but I was homeschooled instead of public schooled, which I didn't think too much about. I didn't think about that too much back then, but I'm actually really happy I was homeschooled, because public school, I would have to get up early, and I'm not good at getting up early. But I have a lot more freedom when I'm homeschooled. My parents can teach me what they want. I can have, like, instead of going to school and trying to sit in class, sit down, shut up, and listen and memorize stuff, I'm actually learning stuff that my parents think is more important, and I get to see how they can implement that in their life. And I grew up around every Wednesday. They would have a Wednesday morning breakfast, which has went into a Wednesday night dinner. And I would see them go there every week. And I wonder why they always go out to breakfast. Because every other day of the week, we would stay home and eat. And I just wondered, why would they do that? And then I learned they're doing that to invest. And after learning more about investing, what it is, how that helps our family, then I thought, oh, this is cool. I would go with them to those Wednesday dinners and breakfasts and events, like the RIA meetings that we met each other at.
Mm-hmm.
We would go to those, and I started by going out into the kids' room that was outside of where the adults were. But I grew up and started spending more and more time learning instead of playing, because I thought, this real estate thing, my parents are doing this, so it must work for them. And from what I've heard about other families, because my parents had been investing since before I was born, and my grandparents were retired. So I never grew up around people going to work every day. So I saw my parents being able to do what they wanted, and that it seemed like they had a lot more freedom compared to what I had heard about other families. So I wanted that same freedom. So I thought, if what they're saying is true, how can I have the same freedom they do? And that's when I learned that they have their freedom from the passive income of real estate. And since I had been growing up around them, going to real estate meetings, and I had been going to those same real estate meetings and learning, I had a thought in my head. I'm like, maybe this is a good idea. Maybe I should try and learn this. Maybe I could do that. And when my brother turned 7, or when my brother turned 5, he actually decided to start investing. You might remember the Lego story he talked about, because that was his first investment. And he asked me, because he needed more money for it, and he asked me if I had money and would partner on him with the Lego set. And I didn't really know much, but I remembered investment. I remember that being a good thing. So I agreed. And that was kind of my first investment. But I didn't really understand investing until I was 6 or 7, 5, 6 or 7, which is when I really started to go to more and more real estate meetings. And I actually started learning. And when my brother turned 7, he decided to start investing in real estate. And I thought, okay, he's actually doing this. Like the whole family is doing this. I should probably learn more about it and learn how to do it.
I think
And
this is
that's how
fascinating to hear your story, if I can jump in, because this is, if the listeners are out there wondering, well, wait a second. Your brother started to invest or learn about it at the age of 5, and you're younger than that. So you're already thinking about investing at or as early as 3. You don't understand it yet, but you're already learning about the concept of it. And you move forward a few years to the age of 6 or 7. And I'm not stuttering, friends out there. The age of 6 or 7, you start to invest and you gain a real interest in this. So I wanted to highlight that no, we're not stuttering here. Ethan is being really clear that yes, he has been learning this from that young of an age. And number 2, I want to honor you for a second, Ethan, because you said something that really shows off the maturity of your thinking. And for anyone from myself to any younger audience member listening, or someone who is interested in investing, the question that Ethan posed, which shows a lot, it gives great insight into the way he thinks. If what they're saying is true, then how can I get my freedom too? That shows wisdom beyond the years. In first, if what they say is true, so you're questioning it. You don't just blindly accept it. If what they're saying is true, then how can I do that too? So already you've dropped some wisdom bombs on us that have been awesome. So let's come back. You're at the age of 6 or 7. You're starting to go more and more to these meetings about real estate. So take us forward from there, from 6 or 7, starting to go to these meetings. What's starting to happen from there, Ethan?
Well, from starting at 6, I am competitive to say I'm very competitive of a brother. And since my brother started investing when he was 7, I wanted to start investing earlier than him because, I always want to be better than him. And it would be funny because he's my older brother.
Absolutely.
So I asked my dad, I would also like to start investing like Devin did. And he told me that I needed to go to the National Real Estate Convention, or some people call it OREA, and I needed to read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad before he would allow me to start investing. And that is one of the other ways that I learned more about investing is by reading books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant, books like that. In fact, every day in the morning, to this day, my parents and I read 30 minutes a day every morning before we do anything else. We get out of bed, we get dressed, we go downstairs, and we read. And that's one of the ways I had learned. And then once I turned 7, I had used the things that I had learned to help me get started in investing. But when I was starting, I had the problem of I was underage. And the best way to get around that is to start a company. No one asks the birth date of a company. And starting an LLC has two main benefits. One, it's good for asset protection. And two, someone that's over the age of 18 that owns part of the company can sign stuff. My dad had told me that we should start the company with $1,000 to buy something small. So I bought a mobile home with that $1,000. I then cleaned it up and sold it for $2,000. This was completely normal to me. I bet a lot of your listeners has heard the phrase buy low, sell high. I had heard that so many times at those seminars and events that it had become normal. And after that, I looked for a house to buy, and a contractor that worked for my dad told him that he just wanted out of a 6-unit. When my dad told me this, I thought it might be cool if I bought a 6-unit for my next property instead of a house. So I did my due diligence, and I figured out that he was behind on payments. That's when I saw my opportunity. And since I had just sold my mobile home, I had some money to buy the 6-unit. I didn't think that the $2,000 would be enough to buy it, but I really wanted it. So I figured out who he owed money to. The first mortgage was held by my homeschool evaluator and friend from a RIA group. And the second mortgage was from a lady I had never met, which kind of scared me to ask her to take over if I could take over the mortgage because she didn't know me and I was 7. So I started by talking to my homeschool evaluator, and she said if I paid the missed payments right now, she would let me take over the mortgage as written. Luckily, the $2,000 would cover the past due payments. I said if I could get an agreement on the second mortgage, I would buy it and pay her that week. Now, all I have to do is talk to a lender I had never met and convince her to let me take over the mortgage. So I asked my dad to call her because I was scared she wouldn't take a 7-year-old seriously. And my dad told her that his son wanted to buy the property and would take over the mortgage payments. I think he forgot to mention that I was 7, but she agreed to meet with us and invited us over to her home. My dad told me that people do business with people who they know, like, and trust. So I decided she should get to know, like, and trust me. We talked for a little bit at her kitchen table, and I realized that she knew my grandpa. He was a dentist in a very small town, and she worked for that same town. I was really lucky that everyone in that town knew everyone else, and that she liked and respected my grandpa. My grandpa wasn't even in real estate. He was just a friend of hers. But when she saw my last name, she figured I would probably be better to take over the loan than the adult that wasn't paying her. When I asked how much was still owed and how far behind he was, she said that she had never gotten a payment from him, and it had been about 2 years. She said she didn't care about late fees or interest. She just wanted her money back. I told her that I didn't have the $25,000 to pay her, but I would make a payment on the 1st of next month. She said she would let me take over the mortgage, but she wanted paid back in 2 years.
Okay.
But she would lower the interest rate from 10% to 5%. I looked at my amortization table and let her know that the building couldn't possibly make enough to pay her back in 2 years. But if she lowered the interest rate to 5% like she offered to, then I would pay her back in 7 years, and she would get her first payment in about 2 weeks. And she agreed, which made me feel great that my second deal was not a house, but a 6-unit, and also the feeling that I negotiated to where I bought a 6-unit for $2,000 as a 7-year-old. When we got in my dad's truck, he told me, the deal isn't done until the paperwork's done. And that's when I realized he was going to make me learn how to do all the paperwork for this deal. And I thought, seriously, I had to talk to someone I didn't know, like every kid's fear, and now I have to do paperwork.
Come on, Eric. Come on, Dad. What are you doing here? That's awesome. Awesome. So you did the paperwork then? Yes?
Well, he told me everything we needed to do and explained when working with a private lender, we need to make their life as easy as possible.
Okay.
He did most of that for this deal, but I still had to remember all the details of the negotiation. It seemed overwhelming then, but now I can write a purchase agreement, mortgage, deed, and promissory note all on my own. And the best part is, next year, her mortgage will be paid off, and I'll be making almost $400 a month more.
And that was almost, I'm doing the math here. That'll be 7 years next year. You'll own it outright, or you'll have that paid off. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the simple, not easy, but simple masterclass on how to do it. And I don't want to make it sound easy because you had to overcome a lot of challenges, a lot of fears. The first conversation, the real estate portion of it, the paperwork part of it, talking to Dad. I mean, there's so many places there that may feel insurmountable or challenging for so many of us out here. But listen to the way that Ethan just shared. That was awesome. And you made it sound really simple. So thank you for that story, Ethan. I appreciate that. What else? What else has happened in the last 6 years that adds to the story of learning and living? I'd love to hear what else is going on.
Another big part in my life is my book, The Treehouse. I actually never wanted to write a book in the first place. I watched my brother write his first book, If I Can Do It, So Can You, which is the name of his book. It took him almost a year to write it, and when he was done, he just gave it out like a business card. So I thought if I wrote a book, then it would be a 100-page business card. And I already had a business card. Why would I want to spend a year of my life writing something that I already had? It wasn't until late last year when my brother gave a book to one of the speakers at the National Real Estate Convention. And the speaker was so impressed that my brother wrote this book that he invited Devin to a conference on the other side of the country. And I had to stay home.
Ooh.
Then I thought it might be more than just a 100-page business card. Then in January 2022, I met Mark Victor Hansen, the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And he told me that if I wrote a book, then he would publish it. Since I had seen the benefits of writing a book, I knew this was the best opportunity. I mean, the best-selling author of the world was offering to publish my book. And one thing to note about Mark is that he's such a nice and uplifting person that if you talk to him for even 5 minutes, then you think, I got to go out and do something good for this world. So it probably would have been harder to say no to Mark than to just write the book. And now that I have written a book, it will make a lot of people's lives better, even if it's just cheering them up when they have a bad day. And now that I have the book, I recently met that same speaker that invited Devin to Phoenix when he gave him a book. This time, I gave him a book, and he invited me to that same conference.
I go back earlier, you talked about the competition with your brother. And that must, what does that feel like to know that, your brother did it, then you went and did it, and now you're going to that conference as well. How did that feel when you got that invitation?
That felt great.
Yes, and if you're watching on YouTube, then I've got Ethan's book up. He showed it a minute ago. It's The Treehouse, by Ethan Wohlwend. And I've also got, he's got Devin's first book, If I Can Do It, So Can You. I've got Devin's second book, The Garage.
I have all the books.
Yeah, this is more than just a 100-page business card, and it's amazing to see you put your mind to work at it. First of all, Ethan, for one, and for two, to hear you talk so eloquently about Mark Victor Hansen, who is one of the ways that you and I met when I had the privilege of meeting him last year in September, and he's also publishing my first book as well at the age of I'll be 46 when it's published. So excited to always talk and promote about Mark. He does have that way of making making me feel uplifted, making me want to go out and help the world in some way. So I think we relate on that one. Well, so bring us forward to right now. We've talked about, your family and homeschooling and growing up and how you learned about wanting freedom and you're learning about that, learning about investing. I'd ask you, at the age of 13 now, what's challenging for you right now in some area in your world?
Well, my biggest challenge, I don't know about my biggest challenge, but one of my biggest mistakes was one of the properties I had bought. It had a list of repairs that needed done. And my dad told me that I was completely in charge of this rehab. It was my first rehab that he didn't help me with at all. He said if I had a question, then I could ask him, but he wouldn't volunteer any information. And since this house was only about a mile away from my grandmother's house, it would be easy for her to drive me over and check on it every week when I went over. It would have only taken me 10 to 15 minutes to look at it every week, but I didn't. And it wasn't until I saw that it had been vacant for about 9 months that was painful. Because I wasn't paying attention, and there was still quite a bit of stuff that needed done, that's when I immediately called my dad and asked. I used the list that I had from when I first went over, and I asked my dad, what contractors should I call that can get these repairs done? And I used my notes to tell the contractors exactly what needed done, and I made sure that it got done by checking on it every week. And although it cost me 9 months of rent, I learned a very valuable lesson, which is always check up on your contractors. And after it gets rented, manage your manager. As a former president once said, trust but verify.
Yeah, I love it. It's not necessarily easy, but it is simple. That you learn the hard way, 9 months of no rent, and it was a mistake, and you took the mistake and you learned from it. And I love that. I love that you could take something out there, you can own it that you made a mistake, and moving forward, you can ask for feedback, ask for help, and take a learning lesson from it. And I appreciate that you shared that story. Thank you, Ethan. Certainly appreciate that. What's happening next for you? You've got a book, you've got real estate. What is something that inspires you now that you're doing and looking forward to each day?
Well, since I have this book, my goal now is to keep buying more real estate and obviously keep growing, because if you're not growing, then you're dying. But I'm also trying to get on a bunch of podcasts to promote this book. And also another thing that I'm doing is me and my brother we started a young entrepreneurs group. It's called MIT, or Millionaires in Training. We run it through Discord, and every week on Monday, we have a meeting, Mondays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. We have a meeting where we can all get together, and me and my Devin teach them, and the subject is whatever they want to talk about. But it's a place for kids for me and Devin to help more kids get interested in investing. So my goal is to help grow that. It's to promote my book and get on more podcasts. In fact, while I was waiting to get on here, I possibly scheduled another podcast for a couple weeks from now.
What might be like a subject matter or a typical session at 4 o'clock Eastern on Mondays for the MIT Millionaire in Training group? Like if I had my 7-year-old daughter come to that, what might be an example of something you'd talk about or you'd share at a Monday meeting?
Well, again, we teach whatever the people at the meeting want. So if they want to learn about private lenders 1 week, then we'll teach them about private lenders and share our experiences with private lenders. Or if they're wondering how they can get started without any money or credit, then we can tell them about owner financing and private lenders. If they want to learn about how they can find deals, we'll tell them about that. We'll tell them how we do it and other ways that they can do it and more ways that they can learn. Recommend books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Family Success Triangle. Good books for learning.
I think this is really fascinating because I feel like there is a lot that I could learn from you. And, what I have right now, just a few properties of single family homes, it's on a far different level than even what you've already discussed, buying a 6-unit when you were back at the age of 7 and now getting ready to fully outright own it here 7 years later, next year. I know there's a lot that I could learn from you, but what if I'm a little bit anxious as an adult and I'm like, I feel a little bit nervous that I don't know these things. And maybe there's an ego, maybe there's a little bit of embarrassment that, man, I could go and learn this from someone who's 13 and his brother is 16. If I can go and learn this, that's great, but I'm a little bit nervous. What would you say to someone who maybe just has a little bit of trouble reaching out? How could you help me to reach out to you?
A good thing I can say to them is, if I can do it, so can you, which is the name of my brother's first book. But I was 7. I was probably more terrified than they would be. Especially when my dad asked me to get on stage and to teach. My first thought was, you want me to do what now? And
how
talking
old
to
were you the
private
first time?
lenders, I don't know. It might have been 11. I think was around 11 or 12. I think was somewhere there.
What was that first experience like when your dad offered you the chance to get on stage? You're 11 or 12, speaking about real estate in front of other people. What was that like for you, Ethan?
It was very scary because I thought, I have ADHD, and I thought, what if I forget what I'm supposed to say? I mean, I have a word for word script, but I'm a kid. They're not going to take me seriously. I'm 7. How am I supposed to teach them? And that's kind of how I thought. And then I'm like, well, my brother's been doing this for a bit. If he can do it, then how bad could it possibly be? So I just said, screw it. I went up, I did it, and I actually had fun and enjoyed it. And now I really like doing podcasts and going speaking.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Fearful of it the first time and then said, you know what? If he can do it, so can I. And he just let it go and did it. And here we are today. And now Ethan is seasoned at speaking and on podcasts at the age of 13. And if he can do it, then you can too, my friends. I certainly appreciate the wisdom that you're sharing. It doesn't matter what frame someone comes in. Ethan's been practicing this for, well, it looks like now probably about 8 years, from the age of 5, or even if you go back to the age of 3 when you're already learning about investing. He's been practicing it, and it's been a continually growing experience. Ethan, how might we find out more about what you're doing? Any links or social media channels? Just how do we find out more?
We are on Instagram. I am on Instagram as Wohlwend Ethan. My brother is on at Devin Wohlwend, and my parents are at Real Power Family. If you're looking us up on YouTube or Rumble, then we are Real Power Family. And if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, if you want to join MIT, then go to clearskytrainer.com. Or if you're joining MIT, go clearskytrainer.com/MIT. And that'll bring you to our website, which has lists of books that we read. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter. We have the podcast that we were on linked to it. We have the podcasts we listen to, I'm pretty sure, linked to it. Any of the seminars we go to, we put on there, and you can learn more about us there. ClearSkyTrainer.com.
I love it. So for anyone out there listening, clearskytrainer.com/MIT, MIT, which stands for Millionaires in Training. And I love that there's a newsletter to subscribe to. You've got list of books. I mean, essentially the blueprint, for what Ethan's been sharing. He teaches it, he outlines it, he offers it to you. So please feel free to check that out. Ethan, I'd love to conclude today with a little bit of a personal couple of questions for you. I ask all of our guests, call this the lightning round. And I'd love to ask if there is a particular book or a couple of books that are on your nightstand right now for your daily 30-minute reading. What books are books that you'd recommend to the audience? You've already shared the Treehouse, and you've shared Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Cash Flow Quadrant. Are there any other books that you feel have been a great value to you in your life?
I like the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, like Rich Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant. Those were very informational books for me. The E-Myth by Michael Life-in-Air was one of those. I don't actually know if I've read Life-in-Air, but I know everyone else has read Life-in-Air. That's probably my next book. I can't think of any more off the top of my head. You're holding up a book. My parents' book, Family Success Triangle, it's a book about how my parents raised me and my brother and integrated family into business. Because people will say, I don't want to do this because it'll take away from family time. And that book is something to help you with that.
I raised that book up for those of you looking at the social media on YouTube right now, the Family Success Triangle. I have it. I've read it. My wife's read it. And it's fascinating, and it gives you a blueprint of living your family values and be able to experience things and teach things and do things together. It's an amazing book. And also, just to build on. Yes?
There is one more book. My brother's second book, The Garage, which is similar to my book, The Treehouse, but it tells it in a different story. It has a couple different lessons. Because the goal of the Treehouse and The Garage, they're fictional stories. And the goal of that is they're more to teach the kids. So they have the same lessons, but it's more spread out. Because the original goal was to have 7 books in the series. So there would be 14 books between me and my brother. In fact, my brother is has some editing, but he's close to releasing his second book. He might have told you about this, but his second book in the Garage series.
Well, if he is close to releasing his second book in the Garage series, that makes me curious with the competition between brothers. I wonder, is there a second book coming in the Treehouse series at some time in the near future, Ethan?
Sometime, I don't know about near future, but sometime in the next year or so, there will probably be a second Treehouse book, and I might even write something more like Devin's first book, a nonfiction about more about how I grew up and how I learned. I kind of to show, like, if you're wondering how my parents had raised me, instead of on a podcast where I would normally just say, don't shelter them is a good start. But I would go into depth on how they did that with me, how I thought, how my side of the story was, and stuff like that.
Excellent. And I'd like to tee it up here so that any of our listeners, if you heard the last 2 things that were said, Ethan had talked about, number one, the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And he talked about Life-in-Air, another book. That sounds like Millionaire, but it's Life-in-Air. Those are 2 books on my shelf, everyone out there. Every book that he's mentioned today is actually on my shelf right now. And the difference between he and I, one of the differences is that he's taken those lessons and invested in a lot more real estate. But even if real estate isn't the thing, it's the mindset and the thinking pattern and even the habit. One of the nuggets of today has been 30 minutes a day reading, start the day. So we're constantly learning, constantly sponging up any new information and just getting ourselves accustomed to this learning mindset. I love it. I'm super impressed by you, Ethan. And I feel that our listeners, like a habit like that can help them reach wherever they want to go. And Ethan has teed us up graciously with a path to find out more, to subscribe to the newsletter at clearskytrainer.com/MIT. You can find out more there.
That'll bring you to the MIT page. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, just go to clearskytrainer.com and that'll bring you to the home page. You should be able to find something about the newsletter there to sign up for it.
Awesome. Well, Ethan, it's been a real treat meeting you today like this. I mean, when I met you face to face a couple months back, it was really easy to talk to you. And carrying on a conversation with you is a piece of cake. You make it really easy. So thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me here.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. I'd love to give you the last word, Ethan. Is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners out there? Any advice or inspiration? We'll leave it to you, my friend, to wrap us up today.
As my brother would say, be creative and take action. Don't be afraid to do something. Don't be afraid to get started.